You're listening to the Assembly Call IU podcast and postgame show, the place where Indiana fans across the globe hang out online after every IU basketball game. Join us for our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and immediately following every IU game at our website, assemblycall.com. That's assemblycall.com.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of the Assembly Call. As today, your Indiana Hoosiers fall in Fayetteville, 73-72 to the Arkansas Razorbacks in a game where Indiana really just didn't play well for most of it, but somehow found themselves in it at the end with a chance to win. Rob Finney takes that shot. Deron Davis's follow is oh so close. A foul ends up being called, and the Hoosiers end up losing. We're going to break it all down. You know, obviously it was nice that Indiana was able to battle back and have a chance to win on the road with maybe their B- or C+ game. But so many mistakes, a lot of execution errors and mental errors, and we are going to get into all of those here on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm going to be joined by Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. But let's start tonight's show as we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And, for my banner moment, we're going to talk about, obviously what Juwan Morgan did in the second half and some of what Romeo Langford did from an offensive standpoint. But, for one individual moment, when it's 72-69, you're on the road, you need a bucket. The ball swings over to Rob Finney, a guy who, had not been shooting well, had, missed a couple of threes badly, really out of sync, had been in foul trouble. It just wasn't his day. And for him to step up and make that shot in that moment, I think tells us a lot about Rob Finney. And it's a lot of what we think we know about him already. But that was a huge shot. It tied the game, gave Indiana a chance to win there on that last possession. And then he was the guy whose number got called there too. And maybe you can quibble and say that Romeo should have gotten that, or you got to play through Juwan. But Rob took it, and to see just the kind of confidence and poise that he had after a game where he really wasn't able to get in sync very much, it's a positive sign for Indiana's point guard of the future, and something that we can take away and feel good about, even on a day when he didn't have his best, and certainly the team didn't have their best. All right. Tonight's Hoosier Proud banner moment brought to you, as always, by our friends at Hoosier Proud and now their new brand, Home Field. As longtime listener of this program know, for years, Hoosier Proud has been the best place to find Indiana-themed apparel that is made by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. And back in August, Connor and the team at Hoosier Proud took that expertise and created Home Field, a premium collegiate apparel brand that tells unique stories about a growing list of schools, including Indiana and Butler and a host of smaller schools that are hard to find unique apparel for. The website address is homefieldapparel.com. And you will find designs there that you can't find anywhere else. For example, this week, with the weather becoming more frigid, check out Home Field's Tri-Blend Fleece IU hoodies and crew necks, which feature vintage designs from IU's storied history, like the much-beloved IU Bison design. I actually ordered mine this week. I'm sure that our very own Sultan of Sweatshirt will be getting it too.
I'm buying no matter how expensive it is.
Unfortunately, it's not that expensive. And then we can't forget, back at their original website, HoosierProud.com, you will still find the best State of Indiana-themed apparel, plus our official Assembly Call logo T-shirts, all while sending 10% of your purchase to causes around Indiana like Habitat for Humanity of Greater Indianapolis. So to review, the two URLs are homefieldapparel.com for IU gear and HoosierProud.com for everything else Indiana, including the Assembly Call shirts.
Can a brother get some coupons?
Yes. As always, use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout to get 15% off your first purchase. That's promo code ASSEMBLY at homefieldapparel.com and HoosierProud.com.
Thank you.
All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team, and we will go first to Andy Bottoms. Andy, your Bottoms line on this Indiana loss.
This just felt like a life on the road game, I guess you could kind of say. I mean, the team, I would argue, sleptwalked through the better part of 25 minutes before they really got it together and closed well down the stretch. But, if you do that, some of the calls down the stretch don't matter. The blatant flop by Gafford and then rolling into Duran's leg that forces the travel. I don't know how you can not call, even if you want to call a charge and reward the flop, you have to call something there other than a travel. The sequence in the last seconds for IU, whether that's a place that you call that foul, is a question. But it shouldn't have come down to that. IU was too lazy with the ball, too careless with passes, took too long to really start stepping in as the receiver of the pass to really get in front, and just gave up turnovers that way. Finished with like 18 or 20 on the game, 18 for the game, 10 in the second half. Just too many careless turnovers. You're not going to be able to win like that on the road. And injuries aside, foul trouble, they tried to battle that. And I kind of thought, weathering that storm in the first half, they'd really come out with some fire in the second half. In those first few minutes of the second half, they just dug a hole that took a while to get out of. And once they finally put game pressure on Arkansas, they started to take some bad shots and turn the ball over a little bit themselves, but just took too long to really, play with the kind of urgency that they needed to play with. Because once they did, they really, from that point forward, dominated the game is probably strong, but really controlled the last 15 minutes or so of the game. Even when Arkansas would make a run, IU always seemed to have one. So a lot of big shots from some young guys during the course of the game. As you mentioned, Romeo hit a couple big ones. I mean, he and Juwan just kind of carried the team for a stretch in the second half. And so I think there's things, if you want to try to look past the immediate disappointment of losing the game in the way that they did. But I think there's some positive signs, and hopefully this becomes a learning experience for these guys of how they need to come out and play from the opening tip on the road, instead of really letting the crowd get into it, which was dead to start the game, and really allowed them to get in it and lose some momentum that way. So disappointing loss. Hopefully one we'll be able to look back on and say that they learned something from, and another game that they're able to close out. Maybe even Archie in his post-game comments someday will say, hey, this was we'll think back to the Arkansas game. We couldn't close it out. Learn from that and made improvement later down the line.
All right, it is Tonsoni time. Coach, what's on your mind?
Just a frustrating performance, I believe, by the Indiana Hoosiers. I don't think they played well, short of that last 10 minutes, 12 minutes that Andy's talking about. And when you're on the road, you can't take 28 minutes to get started. Then you put the game in the hands of people like the officials and so forth. The officiating, I thought, was poor, but it's not the reason Indiana lost this game. Indiana lost this game because they couldn't stop penetration. They weren't in good help side on defense, on lobs. They let the big guy get going and have a lot of energy and have an outstanding night. And when he comes back in and goes for 8 in a row at a key stretch, there was no separation. And that's the last thing. We fought back and gave in, fought back and gave in, and never were able to go over the top. I think this is a game that Indiana really missed McRoberts defensively. I think he could have stopped some of the errors that happened. And I think this is a game where Devontae Green and his shake and bake and downhill. I wrote down a few times we need slashers and north-south action, not east-west early in the game. It just took Indiana 25, 28 minutes to realize what direction they really needed to go against the pressure. And that's why Indiana got beat. And again, you don't like losing. It's frustrating. It's opportunity for a road win for the resume. But even good freshmen and good returning players need to learn how to play. The good thing is Indiana battled and was right there at the end and should have won if they executed the last segment a little bit better.
Yep. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. We are breaking down Indiana's 73-72 loss to Arkansas. Saw a few people asking if Ryan is even on the show anymore. Yes, he is. He's just in Maui, so he will be back with us once he gets back home from Maui. Guys, let's talk about Romeo Langford.
It's a drug test suspension, everybody. Don't believe what Jared's saying.
Let's talk about Romeo because, we get on here, we do these banner moments, and you got to think of a moment real quick. And what I wanted to do was say something about Romeo, but obviously the moment that stuck out was Rob's, and I think it was a worthwhile one. But the truth is, Romeo did so many things today to keep this team in the game. Now, I don't think his defense was particularly good for large stretches. I think his ball handling was very suspect, and that's fine. We can criticize that, and we should. But the reason why Indiana lost this game by 1 was because Romeo Langford is such a great scorer and can go get buckets. And that, to me, was one of the biggest things that stood out today, in terms of the difference between this year's team and last year's team, is in the first half, Indiana got down by 10, I think, at one point in the first half. And it just kind of felt like nothing was going right. And they, Juwan's out, Al's tired, Rob's got fouls, and they just put the ball in Romeo's hands and ran the offense through him, and he kept Indiana alive. The reason why Indiana was down by 3 at halftime is because Romeo kind of kept us alive. And then there toward the end, he hasn't been a guy who's been known for his shooting. He knocks down 2 threes in a huge spot on the road. Finishes the game at 22 points. I thought he was tough rebounding. He had 10 rebounds and had 5 assists, 5 of Indiana's 13 assists. Andy, for a freshman to come on the road and play the way that Romeo did against that type of defense, I know we expect so much of him that it's easy to point out the faults, but I thought in so many ways he was terrific today and played 38 minutes. I mean, he kind of was the glue that held Indiana together all the way throughout the game, and then you got Juwan Morgan in there in the second half that kind of put things, almost over the top for Indiana in terms of coming back. But I just thought we saw so many of the things from Romeo today that make him such a special player, such a special scorer. And, it wasn't even his best. He was 6 of 15, but I still thought he did so many things that kept Indiana alive in a tough road environment.
Yeah, I think, all he did was lead the team in points, rebounds, assists, and block shots. Other than that, he was okay. But no, he really did carry them through that first half. I think everybody looked up at the scoreboard at halftime and felt lucky to be, or fortunate to be down just 3. And if it wasn't for him, really that stretch you said, the game started to get away from IU in the first half a little bit. They had managed to hold the lead. They sat him down up 5 points, and Arkansas ripped off 4 straight to make it 14-13 is what I wrote down. And I think he came back in shortly thereafter, and I'm pretty sure he didn't sit out the rest of that half. So he, and really just trying to drive, make shots. He made some long twos, showed some better range on a shot with hitting those threes. Has been for the second straight game a lot better from the foul line than he had been before. And so, you started to see he and Juwan work together a little bit on those side pick and roll scenarios in the second half that worked a lot. So I would agree with you. He, like a lot of guys, really would get into the open floor and just seemed like they couldn't get control of their dribble. Demezi was that way. Al was that way. Finney was that way, quite honestly. Like, they couldn't really find a guard who consistently, the entirety of the game really was able to be under control. But there were some stretches where he was, you could just tell how tired he was and kind of played through it. And I agree with you. There were some defensive lapses and the way he closed out in a couple scenarios. I think he fouled the guy late on one where he was just, late closing out and just, didn't have the control late in the game. But they're not, it's a double digit game at halftime, if not for him. And so, and he and Juwan at one point, I think, had 13 in a row in the second half. I think before Finney hit that 3. So they really, really carried it and tried to create some things for others as well. 5 assists for him is a solid game. And if he can continue, we've seen him do that at times in games, continue to create for others and continue to work. We could nitpick the defense and some of the turnovers, but this game isn't close if it's not for his work in the first half.
Coach, thoughts on Romeo?
It's such a treasure to have someone like Romeo when things aren't going well that you can just go get some points. Yeah. Every player has some things that when you watch the tape, you're going to pick out, shot selection. I thought he settled for a couple threes or deep shots early and missed. And he's just got to tighten his game with the handle there, especially that one Gafford got him late. But again, I wrote down at some point, I think it was that 13-14 segment. I'm like, or it's 19-16. I said, Romeo, where's Romeo? And all of a sudden, then he took off and really kept Indiana in the game. And it's an interesting thing as a coach, and coaches disagree on this about how to get your best player going. Do you go to a guy like Romeo and run things early to get him going, or do you wait to get things? And Indiana has 2, Juwan and Romeo, but Juwan goes out and Romeo doesn't really get going for 7-8 minutes. Those are tough decisions as coaches. I prefer the better players get a lot of shots. And that's not always the way coaches see it. Coaches want it to happen in the flow of the game. But Romeo was outstanding, and that was good to see.
Yep. Yeah, you look at the numbers, Romeo +3 in 38 minutes. So he had to sit for those 2 minutes, and that's why Indiana lost the game. Way to go, Romeo. Come on. Can't you do some more? All right. Coming up, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 73-72 loss to Arkansas. I will point out tonight's meaningful moment you might have missed. Then we will go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni, and we are breaking down Indiana's oh-so-close loss to Arkansas today, 73-72. And it's time for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. And for this moment, there were so many moments in a game like this. You lose by one, and, when you have so many mistakes and so many questionable calls and, so many things that happen. I mean, one play here or there, if Jerod Davis just makes that tip, there's a completely different tone and tenor of this game. But that is life on the road. Sometimes, Indiana won a Big Ten championship in 2016 because that ball rolled out instead of rolling in. So it happens. Sometimes you're on the positive end of them. Sometimes you're not. But, this game could have been and probably would have been a lot different if Juwan Morgan had gotten to play more in the first half. He only plays 3 minutes. They weren't really productive minutes, anyway. He hadn't really done much. And so, the big storyline for the second half was what would Juwan Morgan do? And as a team, Indiana came out and was absolutely terrible to start the second half. A 3-point deficit quickly turned into a 10-point deficit. It was 45-35, and it kind of felt like the game was hanging in the balance. Is Indiana even going to compete here? And I thought what happened from that point forward is Juwan Morgan kind of got a look in his eye and really just kind of tried to will Indiana back in it, tried to take over, and in that particular segment, the two possessions I'm going to talk about here, they weren't even that productive. One possession, he kind of drove tough to the basket but missed the shot. On the next possession down, he grabbed a tough rebound off a missed Arkansas shot, took it himself, he got fouled, he made one free throw. It wasn't pretty, but what we saw for the first time all game was kind of some life, some energy, some passion. And I really thought that set the tone for Indiana. And I think it really highlighted in the first half with him out how much Indiana misses him when he's not that guy. Because he was that guy almost every minute he was on the floor against Marquette in one of his better performances, I thought, that we've seen from him in a long time. And Indiana didn't have that. And so while that little segment I just talked about only produced 1 point, it set the tone for the 15-5 run that was to come that got Indiana right back into the game at 53-50. And, of course, later, Juwan would knock down some threes. He continued playing well for the entire half and ended up finishing with a respectable line of 15 points, and 7 boards. But I really thought that moment when he kind of got that look in his eye and got the energy, you could see how much this team fed off of that. And especially with McRoberts out, one of those other, experienced leaders, and Justin Smith just MIA and getting benched in the second half, you can't rely on your freshmen to do everything, And so Indiana needed an upperclassman to step up and lead, and Juwan did that. And he almost led him all the way back, but that moment right there, Andy, to me, really was kind of what turned the tide for Indiana, and it was nice to see. That said, a senior like Juwan Morgan has to find a way to play more than 3 minutes on the road in the first half. So some good, some bad, but right there I think we saw exactly what Juwan Morgan means to this team.
Yeah, to me, it starts with that first foul that he made in the first half, just kind of an over-the-back call and a rebound. Like, you can't make that foul, knowing that they were starting him on Gafford. Like, you've got to – every foul that you make, if it's not on him, it's on the wrong guy. You know what I mean? And so, to get a foul like that just really puts you in a difficult spot. And the second foul was like there really wasn't anything you could do to get out of the way. And that's the kind of foul you need to be prepared to give in a game like this. That one, you just put yourself in a spot and you get to a point where – that to me was almost the meaningful moment that you might have missed because it was such a big play. It was so long ago that you might forget about it, but that really kind of set the stage for to him to get in there. And those things are going to happen, and you need other guys to step up. And really off the bench outside of Jerod Davis and just other, in terms of other front court guys that really stepped up, I thought Jerod Davis played terrific and really bought some minutes, played pretty good defense on Gafford in general. But otherwise, you didn't get a lift out of the guys that needed to step up when he went out. They didn't get anything out of Fitzner. They didn't get anything out of Justin Smith. And so it exaggerates the fact that he did that. But to me, it starts with that first foul. You can't make that foul in the first 2 minutes of the game on the road and then think that you're going to find a way to skate through the rest of the half without it. And I think, luckily Romeo kept him close enough that Archie could leave him out. I think if the game started to get away from him a little bit more, I think he would have probably gone back to him a little bit just to try to keep the game within reach, but we won't ever really know that, I guess.
Coach, any moments stick out to you that people might have missed that caused the difference in a 1-point game?
I was going to say about Juwan's foul, and Andy said everything that I was going to say there. The interesting thing, and I know a lot of people are going to focus on officials, but the third foul for Finney on the drive barely was a touch.
Oh, God.
Which set the whole second half in motion where we had to play some other people. And then the final drive and a couple of, I would say 5 or 6 plays at the basket on Indiana's offensive end was a lot more contact. Those are the things within the game that really, it's not blaming officials or anything, but that's when coaches get really frustrated is the consistency. On one end, there's a lot of contact that's not allowed, or contact is barely allowed, and the fouls are called in the other. And I think that was, trying to find something. And I just go back to the fact that if McRoberts and Green, that depth, just having depth of rotation coming in defensively and offensively, would have made up for Juwan having to sit for long periods of time. This was a little bit reminiscent of what happened in previous years when Juwan had to sit out for long periods of time. With that being said, this Indiana team fought, and had a chance, and really should have at least gone into overtime at the end, given probably a worst case scenario today. I don't think we could have dialed up a worse played game by design if you went player by player to lose this game to this Arkansas team. So that's what gives me a little pause about, and I'm not panicking, is that this was a complete, I say D+, C- effort short of Romeo and Juwan's second half, and the game was in our hands late.
I think that's, look, you're always disappointed after a loss. And, I don't want to talk about moral victories because, there aren't any of those. But there are some losses where you're like, okay, but you can see the positives and you feel okay about it. And there's some losses that are just devastating. The more we talk about this one, I guess the less bad I feel about it because of everything that you just said, Coach. I mean, it is disappointing. This is a game they should have won. And I'm sure Archie will say that very thing. But, I think we saw so many things to like about what this team was able to do in the second half. And the fact that they almost came and grinded this out literally by like an inch with Deron Davis's shot, given everything that was stacked against them, there are reasons to walk away from this game not feeling terrible, And so, it'll be interesting to see what Archie says in the postgame. One other meaningful moment that kind of stands out, early in the second half, Justin Smith got blocked by Daniel Gafford. For the life of me, I don't know what he was thinking, just putting weak sauce up there with Daniel Gafford down there after, because he had trouble finishing in the first half. Archie took him out right away. Did Justin play again? Did he play the rest of the second half? I think he might have sat the entire second half.
I think so.
I mean, Demezy Anderson got a ton of minutes, and look, I think the other play was Justin, maybe it was in the first half when he threw it to Demezy Anderson, who was, standing out of bounds, and it was just a kind of a pointless turnover. I mean, Justin really just not there today. 3 points, 1 of 6 from the field, only plays 15 minutes. That's rough. You have that many, you're that shorthanded, you're dealing with that much foul trouble. You need Justin Smith to come and produce for you. And, again, all these things add up to a 1-point loss, but that was rough not having more production from Justin there. You're listening. Oh, go ahead, Indy.
Sorry, just to go on. I mean, to me, the big number that sticks out for Justin is the big 0 in the rebound column. I mean, you're not gonna.
He just wasn't playing tough or smart. I mean, that's
especially with Morgan out. That was really, I think he was 1 of 5 at halftime. 2 of his shots had been threes, and he didn't have any rebounds. I mean, you've got to get more from him, given you got nothing from Juwan in that half. He can be in the background when Juwan is playing well, and that doesn't kill you. But when Juwan's not in there, as your kind of next most experienced guy within kind of around that same position, you just got to get something out of him. You got to get some kind of rebounds and that. And it's one thing to struggle to convert shots around the basket. I think he was 1 of 4 from the free throw line too. So even when he got fouled, he didn't make shots, and so yeah, it was a struggle for him. I was surprised Fitzner played the 5 minutes that shows he played in the second half of the box score, because I didn't really remember him playing much in the second half either.
He wasn't a game a little bit too fast for him, it felt like. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni, breaking down Indiana's 1-point loss to Arkansas. Let's hop into the numbers, Andy. We've talked about a lot of numbers already. Clearly the 18 turnovers jump out big time. And, I think the individual in terms of turnovers that really jumps out is Al Durham, who was really forced into playing a lot of minutes, 36 minutes. I thought we saw fatigue really take a toll on Al's defense in the first half. But all day, his decision-making to me was a little bit questionable. I thought they really sped him up, and it led to him really just kind of, flying into the lane with some wild drives. And, not that Al driving into the lane and penetrating is a bad thing. He's often successful doing it, Coach. But today, he got out of control, got some charges, made some poor passes. And so as under control, as good as he played against Marquette, it was kind of the flip side of that. And I think, again, when you're dealing with the foul trouble with Rob and some of the issues, you've got to lean. He's not an upperclassman. He's only a sophomore, but you've got to lean on your more experienced guy. And I thought from a decision-making standpoint, he was probably the most questionable of all the Hoosiers today.
Yeah, I was really disappointed in L's play. I mean, he started off great, hitting a couple shots early, and I thought, okay, L's really going to bring it. But 5 turnovers from a guard. I know the defense is known for its pressure, but 5 turnovers from a guard is not acceptable play. And the decision making, he misses a pull up jumper on a 3-on-2. That there was a basket there that's not in the box score as a turnover, but that play has to be converted. And that miss was big as well. So, I think what is telling to me, as bad or as rough as it looked like Finney played, he had 0 turnovers in his 21 minutes. That's a number that stands out to me. And it seemed like the offense never really ran very well all day, to be honest with you. But when he was not on the floor, L was running the offense, and he was making some mistakes. So I think, again, that just reiterates the importance of having Finney on the floor. And so you have Finney off the floor, you have Juwan off the floor, and you have other guys trying to step up, and you lose by 1. That again, I don't like. You play to win the game, and you got to finish regardless of scenarios. But again, that number, no turnovers. The ball needs to be in his hands a lot more, regardless of his poor decision there to go a little early. But at the end of the game, that's a number that stands out to me.
Andy?
One that was a big one when you look and compare by half and how IU played was assists. So IU in the first half, 4 assists on 13 made field goals. The second half, 9 assists on 14 makes. I mean, that speaks to just what Coach said about the offense really bogging down and not looking very good throughout. I think the ball movement was better in the second half, and that showed by being able to get in the lane. Jerod had some nice finishes off of drives from other players, and Juwan had some good kickouts and just better ball movement in general. So that was a big one. You mentioned the turnovers, points in the paint. IU got outscored in the paint. That's an area they've really excelled in early in the season. So they got outscored in the paint 38-30 in the game today. And Gafford was certainly a big part of that. And I was a little bit surprised with the way they defended him, which maybe we can get into here in a little bit once we get done numbers wise. IU 8 of 20 on threes. So 40% there, not too bad. 2-point shooting was not as good as it has been. 2-point defense was not as good, not quite as good as it has been to this point in the season. But to me, the assist numbers was really pretty big. In addition to the turnovers, just the ball movement in the first half wasn't good enough. And maybe part of that was who was playing and some of the lineups that were, that were really being pieced together at that point. But I thought those were, that really stood out as you were watching the game. And I hadn't looked at the second half numbers until we were sitting here, but that's important. Second chance points was pretty big for IU. They had some nice putbacks. Juwan in particular in the second half, they had, I think, 11 second chance points in the second half. So that really helped, get back in the game a little bit. But 10 turnovers and only forcing 5 in the second half. Arkansas did have 20 turnovers. So IU, did a reasonable. No, that's not right.
No, they had 12. Only 12.
No, 12.
Yeah.
I was looking at assists. I wished it was 20.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was another area that IU had been good at early in the season, and that was a big one that was not as good as it has been today.
Yeah, Indiana 10 of 15 from the line as free throw watch continues, so 66.7%, still not good enough. Non-Romeo players 2 for 6. Juwan and Deron Davis, the only 2 guys. So only 3 guys got free throws. I don't know if that says more about Indiana or the officiating there, but that's not good. And to go along with the turnover numbers, Andy, Indiana only forces 12. This has been a big plus for Indiana so far this year, and Indiana really has thrived on fast break points and only got 4 fast break points today. On the plus side, Indiana only gave up 6 fast break points despite having all the turnovers that they did. And I thought there were a couple possessions, especially late in the first half, where Demezy Anderson really did a nice job in transition defense to challenge a few shots and not let Arkansas get easy buckets. And we'll talk about him, because Demezy played 26 minutes. And if you had told us 2 weeks ago that Demezy Anderson was going to play 26 minutes at Arkansas, not quite sure what we would have thought, but we'll kind of talk about what that means because it's not exactly ideal. Guys, any other numbers before we close the segment and kind of get on to talking about some more individual performances in the next one? No,
okay. Nothing else numbers-wise for me.
All right. So coming up here on the Assembly Call, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 73-72 loss to Arkansas. We got to talk about the day for Jerod Davis. We'll also talk a little bit more about Demezy Anderson. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night and Monday afternoon at our website, assemblycall.com. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni, and we are breaking down Indiana's 73-72 loss to Arkansas. A game which Indiana, just really did not play well, but somehow found themselves in a tough environment on the road with a chance to win, inches away if that Jerod Davis tip-in had just fallen through, but it didn't. And so Indiana exits with a loss, their first of the season. The Hoosiers now 3-1. Guys, let's talk about a couple of guys who had interesting games off the bench. Let's start with Demezy, who I mentioned there at the end of the second segment. Andy, when I look at the day for Demezy, I talked about some of the transition defense, a few possessions that were good. This was clearly a game that was too fast for Demezy. It just from a ball handling perspective, in terms of comfort level on offense, he did have 4 points, had a few rebounds. But this is not a game where you're expecting Demezy to go out there and play well. And frankly, we know the reason why he's playing. It's because guys like Zach McRoberts are hurt, guys like Devontae Green are hurt, and you need someone with some semblance of ball handling ability. And, he can shoot. While I think that, if you substitute Zach McRoberts for Demezy Anderson in this game, I think Indiana wins the game. That said, from a personal standpoint in terms of development, this was a huge opportunity for Demezy, and I think he's going to be a lot better for this, for having played these 26 minutes in a tough environment, being smacked in the face with how fast the college basketball game can be. And he's a guy with a lot of potential. So I think, as you look in terms of building depth and what positives can you take from this, I think because of this game, Demezy is going to be a more useful player down the road, even if him playing 26 minutes is part of the reason why you lose a game like this. So there's a negative, but in the long run, it could be a positive for Indiana if it helps Demezy's development come along even faster.
Yeah, I thought, I wrote down at one point in the first half in my notes, Demezy not ready for this. And I think he played that way early. I think he did settle in a little bit. He really struggled defensively, trying to close out under control on shooters and not let guys just drive right by him was a challenge at points. And I think, Arkansas hits a few threes and maybe you feel like you really got to run out with that much more urgency. But I thought that was really where he struggled the most, was really just being able to keep guys in front of him off the dribble. He did get a little bit out of control, only was credited with one turnover, but thought there were some times that he struggled, but he had a nice drive and dish to Jerod, I think, in the second half. So, made a couple shots. And I agree with you. We talked about this a little bit after even the Marquette game with the number of minutes that they had to kind of, again, foul trouble had to kind of steal with him on the floor to a certain extent. And, it's one of those you referenced plus minus a little bit. And, there was 3 guys that were negative today. He was one of them. And he's the one I struggle a little bit to hold it against him too much, because if all else is how you'd expect it to be at this point in the season, there's no way in the world that you'd envision him playing this kind of minutes in this game this early in the season. And so while he did struggle, I thought he did some things well enough. That play at the end of the first half where he really ran one down, I think he's playing hard. I just think he doesn't know what to do in some of the scenarios, which I guess is I don't mean that as a backhanded compliment by any means. I think he's trying to work through what he has, by his own words, acknowledged are his deficiencies on the floor at this point. It's just a difficult situation to work through that in front of everybody in a close game. But I do think it'll benefit him in the long run. And as we, can look back on this hopefully and see, hey, here's how far he's come defensively, because that's really where he's got to get better. And that was the biggest issue with him today.
You can also tell, Coach, that Demezy and Romeo are learning how to play consistent defense. Because I agree, and I think they're both playing hard, but there are also defensive possessions where you can tell they kind of take them off, which they could probably do in high school and get away with it. And there's one possession in particular where, Romeo, was just kind of being lackadaisical, and it led to an open three, and then Demezi didn't box anybody out, and it led to a follow-up. And so I think they're learning how to consistently play defense, and they're freshmen. You're going to deal with some of that. But, I've seen some comments about Demezi on Twitter and in the chat, and I think it's fine to criticize his play, but let's also remember he wasn't really expected to have these minutes. And if he's not ready for them, that's not necessarily his fault as much as it's part of circumstance. And again, there's still something positive he can take from it. Coach, did you want to say anything about Demezi?
I think he was very, very poor. There's nothing bright about Demezi's play today from a coaching standpoint. He was lost defensively. Sorry, I'm ruining your.
No,
your
this is why you're here. Tell me.
He was, and again, you guys are right. He shouldn't be getting these minutes, and he's out there giving everything he's got, and that's what you ask for. But his technique was very poor, to be polite.
No, I think you're right on that.
He wasn't closing out. A lot of those baskets, Juwan has to help on the drive at the post and then the dish for the dunks. You hear Archie yelling, Demezi. They're trying to coach him through when you're minus two guards and your lead guard's in foul trouble, he's got to get those minutes, and he's not ready. Again, I wish I were wrong on that. Offensively, he takes some shots that shouldn't be taken. He needs to understand that the bread is buttered elsewhere. He hunted shots, in my opinion, and I don't like to get on here and be negative unless it's about Duke and Hoosier hysteria. But that was, if you go back and track the times, the runs, there were some runs that were made when he was on the floor, and there's a lot of things offensively and defensively when you have to cover up for a poor defensive player. But he's still a heck of a young man. And I love his hair.
Yeah, well, his hair is great. Let's talk about Deron Davis, Andy, who, look, you're looking for encouraging signs about Deron's health. You saw a lot of it today. Indiana was plus 17 in his 23 minutes. Deron scores 10 points, 5 for 6. I thought, showed a few different offensive moves. Even had one where he faced up at the basket, took a dribble, hit a little floater, had 5 rebounds, a few tough rebounds, where he actually had to move to get them. And, those are little things that you're looking for as he, goes through this recovery. And obviously he's, still not moving great and, has his issues defensively. But all in all, some solid minutes from Deron while he was out there. Another good sign. I mean, just the fact that he was able to play 23 minutes in a game this fast and be that productive is another one of the good things I think that you can take from this game despite the loss.
Yeah, I thought he played really well, and I thought he gave IU a chance to give a little bit different look to Gafford defensively because, and I'll let Coach chime in on this after. He would be probably better to speak to it than I would, but I was a little bit surprised that they had Juwan come out and front him early. Put so much pressure on the help side guys to be there and be available, and with the team that really wants to shoot threes, the way that Arkansas does is spacing makes that a little bit difficult. And I thought when Deron came in, he played behind him, basically forced him to make a post move, which in the first half he did exactly one time. And he made a tough shot, and that's fine. But, they were I feel like they were giving up too many uncontested shots to him. And Deron really did a good job of trying to force him out on the floor, got himself in trouble as they ran. I was surprised they didn't put Gafford in more, pick and roll scenarios, because when they did, it worked. Because it was really challenging for Deron to get back. But I thought Deron did as well as anybody did defensively on Gafford, tried to force him out, made him hit a face-up jumper. Again, those are the shots you want him to take. Push him out, make him make a move, and show that he can do something other than dunk and make layups off of dishes from other people. And then, Deron made him play defense on the other end as well with the, again, he just gives teams a different look than what they're used to. There's not a lot of back-to-the-basket big men out there anymore, and he is certainly one of them. I thought he played well. I thought it was really, again, not to circle back to that, not even just for the audience, but for my own mental well-being. But that, the call where, Gafford flops, rolls into his leg there, it's a tough play. It was, again, kind of strange when you go down the stretch. Like they went into him. That seemed a little bit odd. Not that he can't score. And then Finney's the guy that takes a shot. The other one, a little bit strange scenarios of who's taking the shots there. But I mean, he had great position. He's deep on him. He's got the guy right where he wants him. He's going to make a turn. He's going to make a turn to the basket and lay it in. and that's why the guy flops. And that to me is just ridiculous. That should be a foul, but that's neither here nor there. Also, Jerod got called for the old hook and hold flagrant. That's all the rage in college basketball these days. So that's fun.
That foul was terrible, and the foul on
just
him
to go
at the
back
end
to
was
play more
terrible.
just play more of the greatest hits from the officials on.
Was
for
it
him.
Ted Valentine?
Felt like it.
Surprisingly, no. But no, I thought he played really well. And what you said too, I mean, playing the number of minutes that he did, he's starting to look like his conditioning is getting better. And to be able to, and to have to really, with Fitzner struggling and Juwan in foul trouble, they had to rely on him for big minutes. And he really came through in a big way. So that's a positive, again, a positive sign for the team. He is what he is, but he's getting back into good shape and really provided an offensive threat, was in the right spot offensively, and was darn close to having the game-winning bucket.
So, okay, Coach, I mean, let's talk about the defensive strategy on Gafford. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, I think it was okay. You got to do some different things to stop a guy like that. I think when they decided to go Morgan early, they were going to front. And when you front, there's two aspects that really need to be accomplished. Heavy ball pressure on the passer, so they can't make an easy lob, and weak side. And Indiana didn't have either. So it looks like it's horrible defense because it's just lob, and then the SEC announcers are there saying, "Oh, they're just lob it into it." Well, yeah, and that was some of our freshman guard play defense, that we were just standing there letting the passer have a clear shot at the post. So that defense did not work, and it wasn't because of whether Indiana was fronting or playing behind. It was the other defenders that were not executing that at all. And there was a few times when Indiana did front that there was a tip or he caught under the basket and traveled. But I think with Juwan being a little bit smaller, and then you bring Davis in, who's thicker and stronger and bigger, then they went behind. That was an adjustment that was made after Indiana was getting hurt on that. So I think that was an attempt. The dunks and the rebounds and all of that stuff add to his point total as well. And he was a pretty dominant player. I think was a MVP of why Arkansas won, and give the young man credit. He brought great effort, but you're going to have to do one or two of those things to stop someone like that. Jerod Davis, kudos to that young man for coming back. 23 points, 23 minutes, 10 points, 5 rebounds. I thought he got better the more he was in the game. I thought he was a little rough with the ball and a little slow defensively the first 4 or 5 minutes. But boy, that second half, I thought if that's the Jerod Davis that Indiana's going to get, that adds another dimension to our play, both offensively and defensively. I thought it was an outstanding effort by him. And, I know he's going to beat himself up for that last tip, but Indiana's not in the game without that man's effort. And again, I was doubting that at the beginning of the season, and I am 100% wrong. I'm just pleased that asset is healthy and coming back. And Indiana's going to be really good because Duran's going to be able to play these kind of meaningful minutes.
Agreed. Andy, Coach, any other thoughts on kind of the day for Archie Miller? I mean, he makes a decision to bench Justin Smith, which is an interesting one. They're late. Obviously, the one possession that we scored on was the one where we went through Juwan, and he gets it to Al in the corner. They get it to Rob. He gets the wide open 3. The possession before that, it's into Duran for a travel. The possession after that is Rob drives, but Duran's there within an inch of making that. So, I guess there's some things you can quibble with there, but the opportunities still were okay. Andy, anything that you would take the coach to task for in a game like this?
I saw people question the last play of, should you have used a timeout there? A young team that hasn't been in this scenario before, settle them down, draw something up, figure out what you want to do, who you want to get the ball to, all those kinds of things. I guess if there was anything, I would say it was that they did have the one timeout left, which they used between free throws after the Jerod Davis foul. I thought otherwise, used his timeouts at when he needed to during the rest of the game to really stop runs and kind of get IU fired up a little bit. I think when they got down 10, they came out and they scored 3 points. Got a free throw and a made basket the next couple of possessions. So if there's anything, I guess it would be that, because maybe that helps you. You put yourself in a situation where, you don't have any timeouts, but if you get the ball in bounds, make sure that you take a shot with just a few seconds left on the clock and pretty much ensure yourself of overtime. The shot ended up going up a little bit early. Now that did allow time for Jerod to nearly tip it in, but also allow time for the foul. So I guess if there's anything, it would be that. But there's also the argument in those scenarios that the team isn't set. Arkansas is kind of reeling. IU had a ton of the momentum, and they'd really been moving the ball really well and taking good shots. So, if you want to nitpick something, I guess it would be that. But I don't know that I necessarily have a huge issue with it. But that really, to me, is the only thing that came to mind when you asked the question.
I have a mad crush on Archie Miller. And
Coach, we know your thoughts on Archie, but anything you'd nitpick today?
My only question is playing. I'm going to go back to Demezi. There had to be a different choice to go big or go something. And again, Arkansas was quick, so I understand.
What would you do though? Because Fitzner and Justin Smith gave you nothing.
Yeah, I know. And that was. I
think you had to go back to Justin Smith. I don't really know
that's where I would have probably gone a little bit early, because I thought the last 4 or 5 minutes, once there was a substitution, I thought Indiana really picked it up. I saw people in there saying that Archie didn't go to any other sets or plays, didn't do anything differently. Here's the thing. When you have a pressure defense, it's up to players to make plays. You could call sets, but unless players break those sets because of the heavy pressure against teams like that, you just need to go make plays. And Indiana didn't make plays. They were making bad choices with the ball. They were making bad shot selection. And you can dial up 70 different plays, but the decision-making and the ball handling is bad. It's going to continue whether you run play 1 or 2. If you're going to be critical of the coaching staff, it's getting them ready for that. And there's a lot, you can't, when you got freshmen and you got young players and you got injuries, there's a lot of stuff you have to deal with. No one's happy with this, and everyone's going to go back and second-guess their decisions on the court and off the court. There's not much you can do when a team's getting up in your grill other than saying go north and south. And there was a timeout where he got on them and they started going north and south. And that's when Indiana started fighting back, but they just let Arkansas hang too long. The only other thing would be the timeout between free throws. I saw Archie turn around and ask, and one of his assistants said, take it. And he goes, take it now. And then he said, okay. And then he took it. So he got some help on the bench from that. On a miss, I think you got a chance. If you rebound a miss and call timeout, you got a Hail Mary pass down to the other end. If he makes it, you can call timeout and set up something. That would have been my one question too, about use of that timeout. But, man, it's a tough business. And so, the fact that this was a 1-point game when I thought the players and everyone was at a C minus, D plus effort. It's going to happen.
Yep. All righty. Coming up in our final segment, we hand out our game ball. That should be easy. Take a quick look ahead to Indiana's next opponent. And then in last call, we'll deliver our final thoughts on this loss to Arkansas that Indiana suffered today. That's next on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni, and we are wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's disappointing 73-72 loss to Arkansas in Fayetteville today. Guys, this is the point in the show when we hand out our game balls. I'll go first because I think this one's pretty easy. The game ball goes to Romeo Langford for me, 38 minutes. Andy, as you said, led Indiana in points and rebounds and assists, did so many things, did have some weak moments on defense, did have some weak moments from a turnover perspective, but you saw all the different ways that he can score. And I was especially encouraged that, after missing some threes, forcing some threes early in the first half, in the second half, when it was put up or shut up time, and you've got some shots to take, to take and give your team a chance, Romeo steps up and drains 2 3-pointers. And I just think I did a radio show with a radio station in Fayetteville, and they said, how do you think Romeo will respond to the atmosphere? And I said, frankly, one of the things I'm least worried about is how Romeo Langford will be. He's, calm, cool, collected. Pressure doesn't seem to faze him. And I thought we saw that today. So Romeo gets my game ball. Andy, who gets yours?
Yeah, he would get mine as well. Like I said, I think this game gets out of hand in the first half, if not for him. So I'll keep it short and give it to him.
Coach?
Well, so Romeo wins, and I'd have to give it to Romeo too. But I'm going to give a Tonsoni game ball to Deron Davis because I've been so hard on him in in the off season, and I'm just very, very pleased with him. So honorable mention, game ball, but Romeo was outstanding, short of a few passes and things. Excellent effort by that young man. He's going to keep us in games when things aren't going well. So I think it's a very deserving game ball to Romeo.
So how, before we get into the preview, I mean, now that we've had, 45 cathartic minutes to talk about this, I mean, how do you guys feel about this loss? I mean, Andy, is this a game where you walk away from it and it just, it stings because there was a win there for the taking? Are you upset about all the mistakes and the lackadaisical play and how long it took him to get into it? Or did you see kind of in the big picture more positives to feel good about the program and the team from a day like today?
Well, I would be, without Ryan here, I would be remiss if I didn't say that this is why Coach K doesn't play road games until January. But that being said, I think all in all, it'll be a good experience. It is frustrating that they didn't come out well, and they didn't come out and play better from the start. And it took so long to get back to doing the things they needed to do. I mean, like you said a minute ago, once they really got aggressive and started attacking the basket, like that was the difference in the game. And they were able to get a lot of easy baskets. That's when some of those putbacks came with Juwan, where you really got Arkansas, struggling in that regard, and really started to kind of wear Arkansas down, which is supposed to really be the opposite. But they were the ones. I thought they were going to need to bring an oxygen tank out for Gafford at one point. And so, there were positives there. I think with a team this young, if you play this game even 3 weeks from now, it probably is pretty different. And so,
plus you have Devontae and McRoberts.
Well, that would also be helpful. Even with this personnel, though, I would say, I would. So I guess it's. I feel like I've said this a lot in the past, and it has tended to not work out very well. But it's only as meaningful as the way they respond where they're in a similar situation the next time. And so we talked about that in the past, like, oh, this is adversity. Let's see how they deal with this before. And then you just get punched in the face again, and then you go back and do it again. So hopefully this group is a little bit different, and they can really use this and learn from it when they go on their next true road game. Will be the Big Ten Conference game when they play Penn State. So, or actually it'll be Duke before that. So, well, that, who knows what's going to happen in that, but regardless, I think it was a game against a team that you should have beat that you didn't, and you'll probably look back on it in the immediate aftermath and be upset that it's a game you didn't win. But if this turns into something that can win you other games down the road, then maybe it's worth it. But we're
beating Duke.
But it's frustrating nonetheless, because you see the potential, you see how these guys play down the stretch to really get back in the game, even when they still weren't playing all that great when they made a run to take the lead. So I think this week has been a good, we look forward to these tests. It's been a good barometer of what the, kind of the floor and the ceiling might really be for this team, where you had stretches where they looked fantastic and you had stretches where they looked really, really bad. And so, to me, can you start to eliminate some of the stretches of play that cause you to lose a game like this? And if you can, then it's worth it, and you move forward. And if it doesn't, and we look back and say, hey, this started to show some potential flaws in this team that they weren't able to correct, then it'll be easier to kind of come down on one side of that argument or the other.
Yeah, I mean, the flip side to my point, too, is this isn't a great Arkansas team. And this is a team that's replacing a lot of experienced guys from last year, kind of working through some youth of their own. A better team might have really taken advantage of Indiana's slow start and their bad play and made this an even worse loss than it ended up being. And I suppose we're going to find out a lot when this team goes to Cameron, and to see if they're ready for that challenge. The other thing that I would say, Coach, about this game is, for anybody, and there have been people saying this because I've seen it, talking about, I think it's fine to say that Rob Finney should be the starting point guard for this team, but for everybody who has downplayed the importance of Devontae Green, I think today really highlights it, because he surely would have had 2 or 3 turnovers in a game this fast that made you slap your head, but he also would have made some plays, and he would have helped to break the press. And when Al Durham was exhausted offensively and defensively in the first half, he would have been another guy to lighten that load. So Devontae Green has a huge, huge role to play on this team, whether it's as a starter or not, and it probably isn't. And so I think that's important. The Marquette game, everything was perfect. It all went well. So you're able to weather the storm of those guys. Today it didn't, and you really needed a guy like Devontae Green. He wasn't there. So I hope he sees that, and I hope anybody who's still kind of questioning, how important he is to the future of this team saw that today.
Yeah, Devontae's that slasher type at the point guard. And there, we've talked about the difference in the style. Finney gets the show going, but this was a game where you could have played both of them. And I think when Indiana started going north-south at the back end of the game, Indiana was clearly the better ball club, given all the road and the youth and all of the injuries and all of that stuff. That last 10, 12 minutes, Indiana was fantastic because they started going north-south. Well, you got a guy that's injured that is pure north-south, shake and bake and pull up and get to the rim and dish. And so, he does bring something to this team. And, you have to have next man up. Nothing you can do about the injuries, but it does speak volumes of his absence. And we haven't talked McRoberts' absence defensively, too, with the amount of penetration that was allowed against a team that got into the lane. Indiana was able to prevent that a lot against Marquette. They weren't able to prevent that to the level they needed tonight. And so I think those were some things. And I wanted to say, too, this had to feel for me as a little bit, it's getting back. I know we lost, and I know people are going to say that we're on this show, we're overly positive, but I kept thinking we're going to win the game. And in the past, it hasn't had that feeling for quite a long time. It's hoping we win the game. And this had a feeling like we're going to make a comeback, even with some of those daggers and getting down 3 and fouled, and the guy misses the free throw. We hit a 3 to come back, and Finney hits his 3. It's like, okay, that's Indiana of the past. The tradition of Indiana basketball is winning as expected and losses are shocks. So I'm shocked because of the poor play, allowed an official to have an impact. And that's the way Indiana has to lose games from now on. It's not going to be because we're not doing things the right way. We don't have good players that care about Indiana more than the name on the back of their jerseys. We don't have a coaching staff that's doing the right things. This is closer to Indiana basketball, even on a day that's lost, because I'm just shocked we lost. And it took a tsunami of events for us to lose by 1 on the road. And those things aren't going to happen on a regular basis. All the foul trouble, all the injuries, all the poor officiating, and some of those key clutch shots that the opponents hit to lose by 1. It's not going to happen. We're going to be a good team. And so that's the way I think I'm going to try to look at it.
I like it. Coach just jumped into last call there early. That was great. I feel like we should just end things right now. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that because you're an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off your entire order at HoosierProud.com and HomeFieldApparel.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, go to HomeFieldApparel.com. And if you want one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com. On both sites, use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout for 15% off your entire order. All right, real quick before we hop into last call, Andy, we usually do a game preview here. We'll have a chance to talk about UT Arlington some on Monday. That game is Tuesday, so really quick turnaround. That game's going to be at home. I would not expect on his pregame radio show, Archie Miller said that he hopes to get Devontae and Zach back in the next week or two. I certainly wouldn't expect them to play Tuesday. So how good is this team? Should we be concerned that with the quick turnaround and maybe guys being tired, that they're good enough to come into Assembly Hall, Simon Scott Assembly Hall, and steal a victory from Indiana?
I wouldn't expect that to happen. They kind of surprisingly fired their coach after the end of last season, so they'd been a really consistent program and had played really well. So they got a first-year coach. They have a ton of new players. I'm not exactly sure that I understand what minutes continuity is on KenPom, but theirs is 7.4%, which is 348th in the country, which I think has something to do with the amount of minutes coming back. So they have a lot of JUCO transfers and a lot of freshmen. So almost completely new roster for them. They are 3-1 coming in, beat UC Davis today. They have yet to play a game away from home, beat a non-D1 team, beat Northern Iowa, beat UC Davis, and lost to Texas A&M Corpus Christi. So, again, feels like a get-right game for IU. But it is a little bit of a quick turnaround, and in a game where you had some guys have to log some pretty major minutes. It'll be interesting to see how IU, comes back and bounces back. But it did not feel, of the non-major conference teams that IU plays, this one did not jump to the top in terms of difficulty. So hopefully that remains to be the case.
All right. Well, it is time for last call. Final thoughts on this Indiana game, Coach. Do you have anything else? Your last statement was great.
I jumped in a little bit earlier. I'm now on my phone searching for some meds to make sure that I don't jump the shark a little too early. No, hey, Indiana basketball is on the way back. Everyone relax. have a nice meal. It's Thanksgiving week. We'll get a couple of wins, and we're all happy to be here soaking in this basketball. We're fine.
Absolutely. Okay. I like it. Andy, last call.
Yeah, I don't know there's too much to add. I mean, I think you can kind of look at a game like this and a loss like this and see whatever you want. You can be disappointed and upset that the team didn't come out and play as well as they could have played and were careless with the ball and really struggled to, stay out of foul trouble and just, struggle to not make a crucial error at a difficult time. But you can also look and say when Romeo and Juwan were clicking in the second half, it's hard to see other teams in the Big Ten being able to compete with a duo like that. And you like the fight from a young team that was shorthanded and forcing guys to play the kinds of minutes that you wouldn't have expected them to for one reason or another. I would guess in a ideal world, even Jerod Davis probably isn't playing 23 minutes in this game, but these guys are, he and Demezi are playing minutes out of necessity to a certain extent. And so, hopefully a good learning experience. Like we said, we'll look back at some point. This will not fall into the NC State game category of some years ago when we, look back at that game and talk about how important it was because they found a way to win. But maybe we'll look back on it a little bit and figuring out how they were able to make some improvements and correct some things as they go forward and play road games in the future. So, not terribly disappointed, but I'm a little bit, what Coach said I thought was good because never really felt like they were out of it because it just didn't feel like Arkansas could run away. And it felt as though if IU could get back close enough to put a little bit of game pressure on, they would start to, take some bad shots. IU could turn things around, and they did in large part, just couldn't quite get over the hump. But just kind of felt like they were going to find a way to, to eke out the win and nearly did. But a disappointing loss given the way, the last, few minutes went down. But I think there's a lot of reasons I'm going to choose for now. If we're, 25 games in and you see some of the stuff, you probably have a different opinion. But for now, I'm going to choose to view it as a learning experience and one that they'll be able to use in a positive way going forward. And that should start on Tuesday night.
Yeah, the NC State game is the one I was thinking about too, because we all have kind of compared this game to that in terms of what it could tell us about this team. And I think we knew coming in, we didn't know much about this team after Chicago State and Montana State. At least we didn't know what we knew about this team. We thought that we'd know a lot more, after the Marquette game, after this game. And, and I think we do. I think we saw a lot of things to be encouraged about with the young guys. I think we saw Juwan Morgan really play a lot of good minutes. Unfortunately, unable to really produce in the first half today. And that really ended up costing Indiana. And so, there's some things to be really disappointed about today. The turnovers, Justin Smith's, no show. It's going to be interesting to see how he responds. I think that to me is going to be one of the most important things to see from this game moving forward is how does Justin Smith respond, to being benched like that? Because, he really did not play well. And part of the calculus for this Indiana team being a competitor in the Big Ten was Justin Smith being a really productive player. And that hasn't happened yet. And so it's going to be really interesting to see, how he's able to bounce back. But really disappointing game. It felt like Indiana left a really valuable road win in Fayetteville today. But still some things to like. I agree with you, though, Andy. It's all going to be based on the context. Only hindsight will tell us, how we should kind of feel about this right now. And if some of the positive things that we saw kind of prove true and some of these mistakes, prove to be more anomalies and just something that a young team had to go through that was shorthanded on the road, then I think we can look back on this game as something that, that was a positive in a lot of ways. But only time will tell, and we look forward to tracking it all with you here as we move forward this season on the Assembly Call. All right, well, that will do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can also subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Monday afternoon and after UT Arlington. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
This was the most ridiculous ordeal of my life.
Thank you for being here and for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. We appreciate it. And we really do rely on the support of audience members like you to keep our show going and to keep growing. And so we have set up a page on our website at assemblycall.com/support that lists 5 ways that you can support the Assembly Call. And we encourage you to choose whichever method is the easiest and most convenient for you. One of the methods is donating, and so many of you have donated, and we appreciate it so much. On that page, you can choose a monthly recurring donation or an annual recurring donation or just a one-time donation, whatever works for you. And if you don't want to donate, another way to support the show is you can use our affiliate URLs, iutickets.shop or iustore.shop when you're going to shop for tickets or gear, and we will get paid a small commission when you use those links. But however you support the show, we appreciate it. Thank you.